Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Susan Woods, and I'm the Director of Sales at Evolving Solutions. On behalf of Evolving Solutions and Tech Data, I would like to welcome all of you to this event. We are joined this morning by Grants Office, who will provide some insight on funding sources available to you. Here's our agenda for the day. After a quick overview of who we are, the folks from Grants Office will spend about 45 minutes reviewing funding sources available for higher education, K-12, and state and local entities, and how you can leverage these sources to fund your technology projects. We will then wrap it up with a quick review on how you can get help from Grants Office to secure funding at no cost to you. I will ask each speaker to introduce themselves at the start of their presentation. Please use the chat function to, if you have any questions, to submit any questions, and we will be monitoring the chat and will answer all these questions at the end of the session. And lastly, as a reminder, this session is being recorded. So let's get started. Evolving Solutions is a technology solutions company. We have been in business for 25 years, and we help our clients modernize and automate mission-critical applications and underlying infrastructure. We pride ourselves in providing our clients with deep technical skills in all the areas of our expertise, and we live our core values. You can see those on the right-hand side of the screen here. We support our clients with their hybrid cloud journey with a focus on modern operations. We specialize in data center technology, observability, networking and network security, and automation and cloud migrations. We will have contact information available at the end of the session, so please feel free to reach out to us after the session. And now let's get to the meat of the presentation. I'd like to introduce Liz Shea, a grants development consultant with Grants Office, and she's focused on higher education. Liz, please take it away.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. So today I'm going to start out by talking about some higher education funding, both from stimulus funding as well as from traditional grants. So to start out with, I just want to talk about the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. This is the biggest fund under stimulus funding for institutes of higher education, and it basically applies to nearly every institute of higher education within the United States. Institutions received these funds under every round of the stimulus funding thus far, but about $22.7 billion was distributed under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, this one under a program called HEER 2. Institutions had to spend a portion of the funds that they received on student financial aid grants, and then the remainder could be used for institutional expenses that have come about because of COVID. This could include things like technology that's needed to handle significant changes of delivery for instruction because COVID happened. So these funds can be used in a variety of different ways, and they're extremely flexible. I already mentioned student financial aid grants. That's a mandatory use of these funds, and these funds can be used for any expenses related to disruption of campus operations. So things like students' cost of attendance, food, housing, course materials, technology, healthcare, and childcare. Institutions can use the remainder of their funds for things like campus safety, such as PPE and sanitation, to reimburse themselves for hardware, software, or internet connectivity solutions that the institution purchased on behalf of students or provided to students to help with remote or hybrid learning, as well as other costs that the institution can say, we need this because of COVID. So again, very flexible and very technology friendly. Since then, we've also had this third round of funding, the American Rescue Plan, and this put about $39.6 billion into the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. Institutions receive these funds as well. In this case, each institution must spend at least 50% on student financial aid grants, so those same food, housing, course materials, technology, healthcare, childcare that I mentioned previously. And then the remainder is used on institutional aid. A portion of this must be used to monitor and suppress coronavirus in accordance with local public health guidelines, and a portion must be used to conduct direct financial aid outreach to let financial aid recipients know they might be able to get a change in the amount of funding that they receive due to a change in circumstances, such as loss of a job. And then the remainder can be used to defray expenses associated with coronavirus. Again, this is extremely flexible and very technology friendly, and can use these funds to help with any of those kinds of expenses that have come up because of COVID. So in terms of some next steps, these funds are already in hand in almost all cases. And so getting your federal funding office involved is a great first step. Also, your IT department, provost of learning, operations, and other players should be involved. Once you receive those funds, you have to spend them within 1 year. So for institutions, this could be anywhere from January 2021 up through maybe August of 2022, my bad. So definitely next year, getting those funds spent and using them as soon as possible. So now is a great time to be having those conversations. You can see on the screen a couple of websites from the Department of Education, more about these funds, since these funds go directly from the US government, the federal government, to institutes of higher education. I also want today to talk about some other funding. So obviously, response to the COVID-19 pandemic is a super important thing that institutions of higher education are dealing with right now. But there's a lot of other things that are going on as well, and you don't want to let those things fall to the wayside. There's grant funding available for a wide variety of different kinds of projects. I'm not going to read you this whole slide, but these are the kinds of projects that tend to be extremely grant fundable. Knowing that grant makers are happy to include technology as a component of these projects as well. So one grant that I want to talk about today as an example is the Improving Undergraduate STEM Education, Education and Human Resources. This grant is also called the IU's Education and Human Resources Grant. The program has 2 deadlines per year. Many grants operate annually or biannually. This one actually operates with 2 deadlines per year, and the next one coming up will be on January 19th, 2022. This particular program has 2 funding tracks, both focused on promoting novel, creative, and transformative approaches for STEM knowledge and STEM teaching and learning, and to improve STEM education for undergraduate students in an innovative way. One track is called the Engaged Student Learning track, and the goal is to focus on design, development, and research for tools, resources, models, and other information, primarily for STEM learning side of things. This can include student initiatives directed directly at the students, as well as faculty professional development, or more broadly, research on teaching and learning. Again, technology included in service of any of those things is definitely a possibility as well. And then the other funding track is the institutional and community transformation. This focuses on systematic changes, so much larger changes on a larger scale. The goal is to focus on departments or colleges within an institute of higher education, or even an entire institute of higher education, or a group of colleges and universities, possibly even the STEM community as a whole, although obviously that's a little bit more challenging. Again, happy to fund technology to assist in any of those initiatives. So this program, the request for proposals is already out. It's available now. We mentioned previously that the next deadline will be on January 19th of 2022. Funding varies from track to track and what specific kind of project you're submitting. So it could be anywhere from $150,000 to $3 million for a 2 to 5 year project, again, depending on funding track. All institutes of higher education are welcome to apply. That includes both 2-year and 4-year institutions, as well as associated organizations. The next of the programs I want to talk about is kind of a companion program along with this. It's the Advanced Technological Education Program, or ATE. This is also out of the National Science Foundation, and this program will have a deadline of October 14th, 2021. So coming up in just a couple of months, and then it comes around again annually with deadlines in October. So this particular program is focused on STEM technician training, primarily at 2-year institutions. You can see along the top some of the fields that the NSF is most interested in for this type of program, but you can do a wide variety of different things as a part of any project that you propose to the NSF. Things like program development or improvement, as well as curriculum and educational materials development. You can also do professional development for your educators or for educators who might work with those same students, building up your leadership capacity, your teacher preparation, your business and entrepreneurial skills for your students. So making sure that they are ready to go out into the workforce, as well as the instrumentation that you need to help with those curricular modifications. Instrumentation can definitely include some of those technologies that really help out in this space. There's a specific funding track in this program that I especially want to highlight, which is called the Small Grants for Institutions New to ATE. This program is just for community and technical colleges that have little or no previous experience with the ATE grant or NSF more broadly. And it can serve as a prototype or a pilot project for a potential proposal that you might make to ATE in the future. They're especially interested in rural technician education for this program as well. And also I want to note that the NSF has a program called the Mentor Connect program specifically for this grant, with a goal of partnering institutions who are new to the ATE process or new to NSF with institutions who have a lot of experience with this grant to kind of help out and provide some mentorship in that space. So as I mentioned, like with the previous grant, the RFP is out now. It comes out in midsummer every year and gives us a lot of deadlines at this point. We know the next one comes up on October 14th of 2021. Funding varies quite a bit from funding track to funding track, like with a lot of other NSF grants, and can range from $75,000 to $600,000 for a 2 to 3 year project, depending on the specific track. 2-year degree granting institutions must be the lead applicant or in a leadership position for all funding tracks, but other institutes of higher education, as well as businesses and nonprofits, can be partners in this space to help build a well-rounded project. And then the final grant I'm going to talk about today, definitely not the final grant that's available in the higher education space, but the last one I'm going to highlight today is called Humanities Connections. And this one has a deadline of September 14th of 2021. And we do see this same deadline in mid-September come around every year. This particular program is focused on curriculum and collaboration development at the intersection between a humanities field and a non-humanities field, such as the social or natural sciences. The goal of this program is to integrate subject matter and perspectives of 2 or more disciplines, both one in humanities and one outside of it, dealing with the collaboration between faculty at this intersection and developing experiential learning experiences as part of the curriculum plan. The goal would be, of course, that any projects that you develop during the course of the grant period would be extended beyond that, and you would continue to support that intersection. Again, a very technology-friendly grant in supporting development of curriculum and the technologies needed for it at that intersection. The RFP, the request for proposals, is out now for this program as well. Funding varies from $35,000 to $100,000 for 1 to 3 years, depending on the specific kinds of project that you want to propose. And all types of colleges and universities are eligible to apply for this particular program. They especially highlight HBCUs, TCUs, HSIs, and other minority serving institutions as being of particular interest. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Patrick to talk about the K-12 side of things.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Reedy. I'm part of the K-12 team here at Grant's office. It's a pleasure to speak with you this morning. So I want to begin today to discuss some of the COVID response funds. So ESSER funds are a pass-through grant opportunity. First funding flows from the Department of Education to state education agencies, and then from SEAs to local education agencies and charter schools with LEA status. The amount Minnesota specifically is going to be allocated for ESSER funds is formula-based. They'll use the Title I Part A data to determine how much Minnesota receives, which then Minnesota must use to determine how much each LEA and charter school with LEA status will receive. The target recipients for ESSER funds are local education agencies, i.e. school districts, and like I said, charter schools with LEA status. And the purpose of ESSER funding is to address the impact coronavirus has had and continues to have on elementary and secondary schools. One important thing to note is that technology projects are relevant to ESSER funding when awards think creatively and use the funds to facilitate new instructional delivery methods. For instance, investment in technology infrastructure, in professional development and training that will help students continue to learn through some form of remote learning. So, listed here are the allowable uses for ESSER funds under the CARES Act and the SRSA Act, which house ESSER 1 and 2. The big thing I want to highlight is that education technology is called out as fundable under both ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. So LEAs have until September 30th, 2022 and September 30th, 2023, respectively, to obligate these funds. So under the American Rescue Plan, ESSER 3 was announced. With this most recent round of funds, I want to point out that 2 allowable uses were dropped. The first being that anything authorized by NHEA, ANEESA, and McKinney-Vento is no longer allowable. The second allowable use dropped is providing school feeders the ability to address the unique needs of schools. However, one new allowable use was added, which you can see on the screen: developing strategies and implementing public health protocols in line with CDC policy for safe reopening and operation of schools. I also want to note that purchasing education technology is still an allowable use under ESSER 3. Lastly, under ESSER 3, LEAs must reserve 20% of their allocation to address learning loss through evidence-based interventions which address the academic, social, and emotional needs of the at-risk student populations that have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a new requirement under the ARP ESSER funds. I just want to spend a moment now highlighting a little bit of what the differences are between those first two funding buckets for ESSER and this new third funding bucket for ESSER. So here you see a list of examples going through, a list of examples that grants may fund, right? Sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit. So you might ask yourself, who would you involve when you want to pursue these ESSER funds? So any business administrator, IT department, assistant superintendent, or VP of curriculum operations, or the like are going to be people you want to involve when you're thinking about spending these ESSER funds. Key dates you want to keep in mind: funding is distributed directly to SEAs, and the deadline for Minnesota LEAs and charters requesting funds for ESSER 3 is October 1st, 2021. So ESSER 1 awardees have until, like I said, September 30th, 2022 to obligate funds. Meanwhile, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 have until September 30th, 2023 and 2024 respectively. One important thing to note is that reimbursements for COVID-19 related expenses back to March 13th, 2020 are allowed. And if you're looking for more information, you could check out the Minnesota Department of Education website listed here below. So looking at some of the, sorry, I'm having some trouble with this. My apologies. So under the American Rescue Plan, we also had the Emergency Connectivity Fund. So the Emergency Connectivity Fund is an opportunity that is a partner program to ECF, but you do not need to be participating in ECF to take advantage of this opportunity. So this is designed to support eligible schools and libraries for the duration of the COVID-19 emergency period, so that they may purchase eligible equipment such as hotspots, modems, or routers, or any device that combines a modem or a router. So this equipment and services are to be used in the case of school students and staff of the school at the locations other than the location of the school. So for instance, distance learning, and in the case of a library, patrons of the library at the locations that include locations other than the library. So a total of over 7 trillion has been allocated for awards under this program. 7 billion has been allocated for awards under this program. And the application window is open for 45 days. Unfortunately, it closed August 13th, 2021. And we're waiting to see information from the FCC, who controls these funds, if another window will be open. So again, suggested actions: if you happen to apply for these funds and receive them, we suggest you get in contact with your business administrator, your IT department, or anyone else. Any key dates to keep in mind: like I said, the application window is open for 45 days and closed on August 13th. We will be keeping an eye to see if those windows will reopen, dependent on how many funds are still available for the program. And if you want more information, you could follow the link, emergencyconnectivityfund.org, which is housed by the FCC. So Similar to higher ed, these are programs that that are very, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, very tech friendly, and that grants tend to want to fund. So anything from remote virtual education, STEM literacy initiatives, extended learning time and programming, and college and career readiness, just to highlight a few here. So I want to talk a little bit about a national program called the Education Innovation and Research Program, or EIR, early phase. The deadline is quickly approaching next week on August 27th, 2021. So EIR is a program that supports the development, the implementation, and feasibility testing for innovations that demonstrate promise, but need some further examination to determine merit. The goal of these projects is that they improve student achievement for high-need students. So a request for proposals is available now. The funding amount, it's a large prize, it's $4 million for 5 years, but there is a 10% cost match requirement. And to be eligible, projects must serve high-need students, but one of the nice things about that is you get to define what that entails. So nonprofits, community organizations, BIE schools, and SEAs can apply in addition to LEAs. So institutions of higher ed, businesses, nonprofits, and education service agencies can also partner with their local education agency to apply for this award. So focusing on some state-specific grants, the first one I want to highlight is 21st Century Community Learning Centers, or 21st CCLC. And in Minnesota specifically, we're anticipating a deadline for this in spring of 2023. So the 21st Century Community Learning Center program supports high quality, extending learning time programming for students who attend high need schools. So this could be before school, after school, or even in the summertime. And really just about anything that falls under that umbrella of extended learning time is fundable. So requests for proposals, like I stated, will be available either late 2022 or early 2023. And the funding amount is formula-based, lasts up to 5 years. And who is eligible? It's, once again, nonprofits, IHEs, community organizations can apply in addition to local education agencies. But these projects, you have to keep in mind, must serve high-need schools, i.e. 40% or more free reduced lunch. And in Minnesota specifically, competitive priority is given to programs where at least 2/3 of the students to be served with the funds are in grades 5 through 12. So the last program I want to highlight today is increase STEM course offerings. The deadline for this program is October 1st, 2021. So increased STEM course offerings is all about encouraging low-income and underserved students to participate in advanced placement and international baccalaureate STEM programs. So this is a unique grant in that it provides opportunities for professional development for educators, curriculum development for a school, as well as the purchasing of books and supplies related to STEM programming. So anything that goes into a school's AP or IB STEM programming is essentially fundable as long as it's servicing these low-income and underserved students. So request for proposals just opened up this week. It's available now. And the funding amount is going to be formula-based and lasts up to 2 years. A maximum grant amount in fiscal year 2022 and 2023 will be $75,000. In the previous 2 years, we saw it a little bit higher, but they were giving fewer awards. So the chance of being awarded this should be a little bit better. And eligibility notes, projects must serve, once again, students attending high-need schools, and the data used to calculate that, 40% or more free reduced lunch. And Minnesota school districts and charter schools are eligible to apply. And important to note that grants will be awarded in Minnesota on an equitable geographical basis as much as they can do so. So I'm going to hand it off to Chris Barnes, who is our GDC for state and local government.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And thank you to everyone for tuning in today. So as Patrick mentioned, my name is Chris Barnes. I'm a grants development consultant here at the grants office, and I head up our state and local government team. So what I'm going to do now is sort of shift to really talking about the state and local government side of the house, both in terms of one of the new big versatile stimulus buckets that came out of the American Rescue Plan, what's called the state and local fiscal recovery funds. And then I'm going to shift to a couple of federal grant programs that are very technology friendly in terms of helping governments really address security and emergency preparedness concerns. Those grants as well are particularly technology friendly, and there's a lot of opportunity to use those grants to fund some really technology rich projects. So with that being said, I do want to first start with the state fiscal recovery funds. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because really, since our focus is here on Minnesota, you don't necessarily need to know all about the different methodologies and distributions, with this sort of first 219.8 billion that's going to states, territories, and tribal governments. I will say that the state of Minnesota received a little over $2.8 billion in state fiscal recovery fund. That is funding that has directly gone from the Treasury Department and was allocated to the state of Minnesota to hold at that state level and to work on and sort of assist and fund projects that are going to do a variety of things. I'll talk about those eligible expenses in a minute, but really this is flexible funding that the state has received and that they can hold at the state level for a variety of different initiatives. So that 2.8 billion that the state has received is being split into two tranches, meaning that they are receiving 50% now. So likely Minnesota has already received their first sort of allocation of that $2.8 billion. And then a year from now, they are going to receive the rest of that 2.8 billion. So essentially they get 50% now, 50% a year from now. And the purpose of doing so is the Treasury decided for some states, which Minnesota is one of those, who don't have a particularly high unemployment rate that's over 2% from their previous pre-pandemic unemployment levels. They are splitting those funds up into two packages so that states have a little bit, are sort of forced to think about longer term investments with these funds. So that's really why we're seeing Minnesota receive that 2.8 billion split into two different tranches. So from here, I want to sort of shift to the local fiscal recovery funds, and that's where the 130.2 billion of that $350 billion has been allocated, is to metropolitan cities, local governments with populations under 50,000, and then to counties. So if anyone on the call today has any experience with the Coronavirus Relief Fund from the CARES Act, that was $150 billion in flexible aid that went to state and local governments. But oftentimes what happened for those smaller governments is that funding went directly to a state. So the state of Minnesota got those funds, and then they sort of decided how they wanted to reallocate them. In the case of the fiscal recovery funds, everyone gets a piece of that pie now. The state isn't deciding how to allocate those funds, but instead everyone is going to receive an allocation that is set aside from the Treasury. So in this case, metropolitan cities, smaller local governments, counties all receive a direct allocation. So essentially what happens here is that these states receive these funds, and like the state fiscal recovery funds with Minnesota, they receive 50% now and 50% a year after receiving that initial allocation. So the Treasury is really looking to encourage states and local governments to both invest in sort of immediate pandemic response needs, but also to be sort of forward thinking in terms of how they want to use these funds and really consider what kind of sort of future-proof projects can they sort of implement? What are the sort of investments that state or local government may be looking to implement? And so part of the reason they've done that is because they want these different state and local government entities to really prepare and invest for both future emergencies, but also to address some of the sort of needs that they may have fallen to the wayside because they were so concentrated on those sort of immediate pandemic responses. So that's why we see for both the state and local fiscal recovery funds, that's why we see a deadline of December 31st, 2024, by which these funds have to be spent. That's a very long runway when we compare that against the coronavirus relief fund, which had that deadline of has a deadline of December 31st, 2021. So there was a real immediate need to spend those funds quite quickly. And so this time around, the Treasury is really asking states and local governments to be deliberate about how they want to invest these funds and think about what kind of priorities they want to attach to them. So moving on to the next slide, the eligible expenses for the state and local fiscal recovery funds are the same. So as you can see here, they are quite broad, and I'm going to highlight a couple that are really going to be, I think, the most technology friendly. So one eligible expense is to simply respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. So that can include providing direct assistance to households, small businesses and nonprofits, or provide aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality, which all obviously suffered under the pandemic. These funds can also be used to pay workers premium pay, or those essential workers premium pay. They can be used for what's called the provision of government services to the extent of reduction in revenue, which essentially means that states and local governments can calculate with the formula that the Treasury provides them how much revenue they lost due to the pandemic, and then they can use up to that amount on providing government services more broadly. So that doesn't have to be a pandemic response, but anything that falls broadly within that sort of umbrella of government services can be supported with these funds. So the Treasury has specifically said these can be used for things such as public safety investments. They can be used to modernize, hardware and software in terms of cybersecurity modernization. So there's a lot of flexibility there with how those funds can be used in that sort of space of providing government services. And then finally, they can be used to make investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So what I was just talking about a minute ago about making those sort of investments for the future, that's really where, one of the ways in which the Treasury is really emphasizing that is for those kinds of investments. And that doesn't just need to be, the physical sewer infrastructure or water infrastructure, for instance, but it can also be used to update and install cybersecurity measures for water treatment facilities. So again, a lot of flexibility there in how these funds can be used and the kinds of technology initiatives that they can support. And those funds can be regranted to private nonprofits, public benefit corporations, or special units of state or local governments. Basically, the only things you can't use these funds for are to deposit them into a pension fund, and you can't use them to finance tax cuts. So there's a lot of flexibility really in terms of how you may want to use these funds and the kinds of activities they'll support. So anything that's going to be a COVID response of some sort, and maybe addressing the continued need for remote work or hybrid work environments, or any sort of activities that are going to support the delivery of government services to residents can definitely fit within these funds. So on the next slide, in terms of how these funds are being distributed and that process by which you pursue them, it's going to look different for everybody. And the reason for that is because essentially the Treasury allocates these funds to states, to local governments, and essentially tells them, here's this funding, decide how you want to spend it, decide how you want to allocate it. And so what happens is states and local governments decide sort of internally what kind of process they want to set up for distributing those funds. And so that means there's no one set or sort of one size fits all approach to pursuing these funds. It really comes down to sort of internal discussions at your organization whether you're at a state agency or a local government. And it really depends on sort of maneuvering internally, speaking with the right folks who are connected to those funds, the people who are likely in charge of overseeing their distribution, and really talking with them about your projects and really talking with them about what the steps are for maybe requesting some of these funds, asking what it looks like to put, what a proposal might look like, because everyone may be asking for slightly different things. So if you're thinking about who in your organization to involve, it's certainly good to loop in your IT department, your finance officers, who are likely the ones who are going to be in charge of those funds if you're at a local government. So that might be, say, a city finance officer, a county finance officer, really whoever you think is most likely to be in charge of those funds is who you're going to want to reach out to. And then that could also include department administrators, could include city council folks, whoever sort of is playing a role in deciding how to spend these funds, what sort of priorities to attach to them. That's really who you want to be in conversation with. And if you're at a state agency, really what we suggest is to reach out to the governor's office, to work with the state legislature. Likely they're both going to be involved in some way with this funding. In terms of key dates to keep in mind, all of these funds have to be spent by December 31st, 2024. For some of those larger infrastructure projects, you'll have until December 31st, 2026 to spend those funds, just to allow, or not to necessarily spend the funds, but to allow those projects to complete. But that's really going to be for those large infrastructure projects like, say, installing broadband towers or something like that. And if you're looking for more information on these funds, the Treasury actually has posted a lot of really great and useful information on their website about the fiscal recovery funds. They've provided some documentation that gives some eligible possible use cases. It's a non-exhaustive list, but it is helpful if you're trying to sort of wrap your mind around what are the possibilities out there for how these funds could be used. So it's definitely worth checking that information out if you've got some questions on what these funds can be used for and what kind of projects the Treasury is envisioning they could be supporting. And so there are a variety of types of projects that state and local government funders like to support. And in terms of the fiscal recovery funds, much of these could be supported, many of these initiatives could be supported. So not only a response to the pandemic, but also connectivity sort of options, whether it's installing towers or maybe providing public Wi-Fi. Telework obviously is a crucial sort of thing that folks are needing to address still. Emergency preparedness, public safety, improvements to corrections and to just justice delivery, public transit infrastructure, and then election security. So there's a lot of options out there, and this is not even a list that captures everything, but it does give you a sense of the kinds of activities that can be supported through both the stimulus funding as well as many federal and state grants that are out there. So I do want to shift gears and wrap up my portion quickly with a couple of just highlighted sort of versatile grants that are really designed to support homeland security and emergency preparedness. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is the State Homeland Security Program. That is the grant from FEMA that basically supports anti-terrorism sort of activities. So it's really about allowing states and local governments to prepare, to mitigate, respond to, and recover from acts of terrorism. So FEMA essentially gives money to each state. So in this case, they allocated $4,602,500 to the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, and it's specifically the Minnesota Department of Public Safety who receives these funds. They submit an application to FEMA every year. And then from there, once they receive those funds, they redistribute them to state agencies and local law enforcement jurisdictions. So 80% of that 4.6 million goes to local law enforcement agencies, local governments, and then they keep 20% at the state level for state agency purposes. So there are a variety of eligible expenses with these funds. IT and cybersecurity are two of those. FEMA has really begun to emphasize the need for addressing cybersecurity vulnerabilities at the state and local government level. And so they've decreed that 7.5% of a state's award that they receive has to be spent on cybersecurity projects of some sort. So again, this is a very technology-friendly grant, one that we see come around every year, and one that is very much worth looking into and having on your radar if you're sort of interested in leveraging some of those funds. And you would specifically need to reach out to the Department of Public Safety to get further information on how you would sort of pursue those funds, what that application process looks like, as it does differ. Those deadlines, local deadlines, differ across each state. And then finally, I also want to highlight one other grant. That's the Emergency Management Performance Grant, again out of FEMA. This is one where Minnesota been allocated $6,280,633 to support sort of all hazard emergency preparedness initiatives. So again, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety submits an application to FEMA. FEMA gives them the money, and then they reallocate those funds. Most often to county emergency management agencies and local municipalities in Minnesota. They do keep some of those funds at the state level, but primarily these go to your emergency management folks. And from there, they sort of use those funds at that local level. So even if you're not in an emergency management department, you certainly can reach out to, say, your county emergency management department and talk about perhaps partnering on a project where some of those funds might be leveraged. So again, IT and cybersecurity are shouted out by FEMA as specific kinds of eligible expenses that you can use those funds for. So very much worth having on your radar if you do perhaps work closely with your emergency management agency to just see if there's a way that you could partner with those funds. And so with that, I'm now going to sort of kick things back to Susan to wrap things up.
Thank you very much, Chris. And wow, what a great session and some good information on funds available. We now just have to figure out how to get our hands on that. So let me give you some insights into the offer that we have. With the support of Tech Data, Evolving Solutions would like to offer the participants on this call the opportunity to get a customized grants office funding assessment report. Please contact Kurt Ostrowski. You will see Kurt's contact information here on the slide to get access to this offer. Let me just highlight a few things on the offer. Grants Office will develop and review a customized funding assessment report based on your identified IT projects. They will drill down on your specific projects to confirm that the grant alignment, and they will consult with you on your grant application process. I've seen a copy of this report, and let me tell you, it is quite detailed. So please, I would encourage you to reach out to Kurt if you have an interest in getting started to get some help from Grants Office. Kurt, I see we have a few questions. Can you maybe lead us through getting those answered from our panelists, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I see one that came in around K-12, so this might go towards Patrick. The question is, I noticed that some of the opportunities for K-12 didn't have a specific date for request for proposals. Why would that be, and where could I find that information?
Yeah, so great question. So with the K-12 grants, specifically the state ones, we base the time frame for request for proposal on historical data. So for instance, the 21st CCLC, that information is both a combination of the historical data and what is currently listed on the Minnesota Department of Education website. So if that's a great resource for you to pay attention to see when that information is going to be updated. That information is also something that you can contact your representative with Evolving Solutions, and they're happy to shoot a question to Grants Office, and we could track that down if that's not readily available on the Minnesota Department of Education website.
Yeah, and I think to kind of tail in on that also is this is all going to be funded through our distributor Tech Data as well as Evolving Solutions. So really, I mean, we're here to do all the legwork for our customers, and any questions that we have, we work with the grants office, and they put a ton of time into, narrowing down and getting that information for us. There's another
Absolutely.
one here. This one may go to Liz. It's about the HERF. So it's, what do I need to do if I want to use higher education emergency relief funds for my project?
Yeah, great question. So these funds are really nice because they're already in hand at your institution. You don't have to worry about an application process like you might see with some other grants. Generally, the best thing to do is to write out just a few sentences about what you want to do, what your technology is that you plan to use, and why you need it because of COVID. So whether that means that you're facilitating remote learning, you're helping with something going on with campus safety, dealing with whatever it might look like for that technology, connecting it back to COVID, just a few sentences, and then take that to your leadership, and the leadership teams have a conversation internally about how to spend those funds. Who exactly is involved in those final conversations definitely varies from institution to institution, but getting those few sentences in front of that team of people can really help facilitate you being in the running to get some of those funds in that internal competition process.
And also, I guess we look at, I mean, if they have any projects that are kind of IT or associated with IT, with remote workers, students, anything like that, I mean, they can certainly bring us those ideas, and then we can validate those along with your team, correct? Whether it's higher ed, whether it's K-12, whether it's city, county, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we can have a conversation about as is helpful.
Good. And then I see one more here. This kind of wraps up on the local government side. So I'm guessing this is going right back to Chris. I'm looking at taking advantage of my government's fiscal recovery funds. What should a project proposal kind of look like?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And as I mentioned earlier, there's not a one size fits all approach. So you'll want to first talk with the folks at your local government who are in charge of these funds, because they're the ones who will advise you directly on what putting together a proposal would look like, what sort of information needs to be completed. But even with that being said, there are some best practices you can engage in that I think, regardless of what may specifically be requested, these are still things that are very much worth doing and worth having prepared for any proposal or conversation you might be having about your project. And so that would be things such as identifying the clear sort of pain points and needs that your, like, let's say your department has. So specifically, if you're looking for a COVID response project, identifying specifically what has been impacted, what's been exacerbated by the pandemic, what sort of issues have been created by the pandemic, and then from there, have a clear sense of what is it that we are asking for, what's our budget that we're looking at, what are the sort of solutions that we're proposing, and really connect those dots between the issues that you're seeing, the sort of pain points you have, and then explain how those, say, technology solutions are going to help address those challenges. And having that clear budget in mind is also very important, because since there's all this money sort of flowing to states and local governments, everyone is sort of coming out of the woodwork to see if they can leverage any of those funds. And your county finance person, for instance, doesn't want to be treated like an ATM. So you want to come with a clear sort of ask in mind and have a clear sense of, here's how much we need, and here's what we would be doing with these funds. So show them that you have a clear project, how you want to implement it, and that that you demonstrate that you've clearly thought about how you want to leverage that funding. And those are some, I think, steps that are very much worth taking, regardless of what that specific proposal request might look like for you at your local government level.
Perfect. And I would also add, I mean, that's what Evolving Solutions is here for. I mean, if you need budgetary quoting, we have excellent architects on staff. We can help you navigate. If you pull a project that you think you might have for 2022 or the end of this calendar year, we could sit down with you, we can talk, we can architect that solution, we can pull budgetary pricing, we can help you wrap all that up to present to the fiscal board, the city board, or city council, county board, school district, whoever it may be. So you're not going to go into this kind of blindsided as an IT department. We're here to help you design that. We'll work with the grants office to pull together all that paperwork. It's obviously of no cost to you, so that's our offering. So I think that's it for questions. I haven't seen any other come in, so maybe I'll pass it over to Susan for a final wrap here.
Thank you very much, Kurt. And with that, I would like to thank our panelists from the Grants Office for their participation, of course, our sponsor Tech Data, and all of you for your participation today. I hope you found a few valuable nuggets here today that will help you support funding and get funding for your projects. We really do look forward to helping you as you go down this journey to secure some funding. With that, everybody, please have a great day. Thank you.